The narrow beams of their headlamps cut through the oppressive darkness of the cavern, revealing the strange, unnatural symmetry of the rock walls around them. Dr. Mira Solis, a leading geologist with a reputation for uncovering Earth's ancient secrets, ran her hand along the cold surface, tracing her fingers over barely visible lines that snaked their way up and down the walls. These formations, she knew, shouldn't exist. Not here, and not with such precision. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, swallowed by the crushing silence of the underground expanse. "Are you sure it's not some freak formation?" asked Grant Ellis, the team's lead archaeologist, a man with more experience uncovering ruins in remote deserts than delving into the mysteries beneath the earth. He tilted his flashlight, illuminating what appeared to be strange metallic veins running through the rock, glistening faintly under the artificial light. "No way," Mira replied, almost defensively. "These structures, these angles, they're too precise to be natural. It's almost like—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Like architecture." Their expedition had begun as a simple survey of a newly discovered cave network deep in the Siberian tundra. But now Mira's pulse quickened with a strange mixture of excitement and dread. She glanced at the rest of the team, 7 individuals, each an expert in their field, each handpicked for this operation. Their curiosity mirrored her own, but beneath that curiosity lay a growing sense of unease. As they moved deeper into the cavern, the temperature dropped sharply and a metallic tang filled the air. They pressed forward, following the veins of metal that grew more distinct, winding into complex patterns that hinted at intelligent design. Finally, they reached a towering structure, massive, alien, and humming with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. It was a door 30 feet high and etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe under their lights. "Is it moving?" Grant asked, his voice quivering. "It's just a trick of the light," Dr. Caroline Lee, the team's biologist, said, though her voice held no conviction. Mira approached the door, eyes wide, and traced a gloved hand over the symbols. They were unlike any script she had encountered in her studies, more organic, almost alive, pulsating as though the door itself were breathing. The sensation prickled her skin, and a subtle nausea churned in her stomach. "Are we really going in there?" whispered Luis Ramirez, their tech specialist, whose eyes darted around the cavern as though expecting something to emerge from the shadows. "We've come this far," Mira replied, her voice firmer than she felt. She turned to the group, noting the tension etched across each face. "If we don't, we'll regret it forever. This could be the discovery of a lifetime, but we need to stick together. No one wanders off." She barely finished speaking when a faint hum vibrated through the air, low and resonant like a distant heartbeat. The door shuddered, its symbols flaring briefly before the colossal structure slid open with a slow mechanical groan, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. They hesitated on the threshold, their breaths fogging in the frigid air. The cavern seemed to breathe with them, the cold growing deeper, almost sentient, as if the dark itself were waiting to consume them. One by one, they switched on their more powerful lights and stepped forward, their boots crunching on an unusual ground that felt far too smooth, too polished to be stone. It was then that they realized they had crossed the boundary from rock to metal. The floor beneath their feet gleamed dully in the beams of their lights. It looked like some form of alloy, unblemished by age, stretching into the darkness with perfect, unnatural symmetry. The walls, now visible under the light, were lined with strange, vein-like structures that pulsed faintly. The sense of unease grew sharper with each step. They found themselves in a vast, empty hall. Pillars lined the walls, each one adorned with alien carvings that twisted and looped in intricate patterns. Their flashlights flickered briefly, causing a ripple of alarm among the team, but stabilized after a moment. Mira's heart pounded as she examined the carvings. Some depicted figures with elongated bodies and limbs, creatures with features disturbingly reminiscent of both insects and reptiles, their eyes wide and empty, staring into the void. "It's a depiction of a species," Caroline whispered, almost reverently, studying one of the carvings. "Do you think this could be a record of them?" "Whoever they are, I'm not sure I want to know," muttered Grant, casting uneasy glances at the shadows that seemed to dance at the edge of his light. Further in, they came upon a series of alcoves embedded into the walls. In some, they found desiccated remains, bodies with impossibly elongated limbs and gaunt faces frozen in expressions that seemed halfway between terror and reverence. The remains were covered in an unknown material, a thin, translucent membrane that seemed to preserve them in unnatural stillness. Luis gagged, recoiling as his light illuminated one of the preserved faces, its empty eye sockets seeming to watch him. "God, what happened to them?" he whispered, voice shaking. Mira stepped closer, feeling the weight of centuries of silence pressing down on her. The membrane covering the bodies seemed almost organic, as though it had grown over the creatures rather than been placed there intentionally. The twisted remains, with their distorted bones and unnaturally elongated fingers, were grotesque, as though they had been transformed somehow. The notion unsettled her deeply. "They might not have died naturally," she murmured, disturbed by the thought. "What if they were changed? Maybe by something in this base?" The others shifted uncomfortably. The more they saw, the more it became clear that they were not just in a structure, but a relic of something catastrophic, something that perhaps even the builders had not fully understood or controlled. In the center of the room stood a massive throne-like structure. Unlike the rest of the base, it appeared worn and cracked, as if it had endured centuries of hardship. A faint, residual energy hummed around it, flickering dimly, as though it was trying to function after millennia of dormancy. Mira approached, entranced by the sheer alien grandeur of the object, her fingers itching to examine it more closely. As she reached out, a sudden intense surge of light filled the chamber, blinding them all. A low-frequency hum grew louder, throbbing through their bones, vibrating painfully within their skulls. Mira staggered back, clutching her head as the sound became a roar. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The lights returned to normal, revealing the team standing in a stunned silence, breaths ragged, eyes wide with terror. They looked at each other, expressions of shared fear passing between them. "What just happened?" Caroline asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Mira replied, shaken. "But I think we just triggered something." A silence settled over the group as they realized the implications of her words. Whatever they had uncovered was not dormant. It was alive, and it was aware of their presence. The thrill of discovery had transformed into a creeping dread, a bone-deep fear that whatever secrets this place held, it wasn't meant for human eyes. They were intruders, trespassers in a forgotten world, and they had just knocked on the door. The team moved cautiously, their flashlights flickering as they ventured deeper into the sprawling, alien structure. The cold, metallic ground beneath them hummed faintly, pulsing as if alive. Mira felt the rhythmic vibration through her boots, echoing up her spine, settling into her bones. It was like the base itself was breathing, attuned to their presence, subtly shifting and reshaping with each step they took. The first chamber they entered after the initial hall was a vast, dimly lit room lined with rows of strange, cylindrical devices embedded into the walls. Each cylinder was filled with a transparent, viscous fluid, and at the center of each floated intricate metallic structures, strands of twisted metal, lattices, and what looked disturbingly like veins or nerves. As they approached, they saw the strands twitch faintly, rippling as though in reaction to their proximity. "Look at these structures," Mira said, her voice laced with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "They're like circuits, but organic. It's as if they're growing," said Dr. Caroline Lee, leaning in to inspect one of the devices more closely. She tapped the glass lightly, and the metallic strands recoiled, coiling tighter, reacting like a living creature. She pulled her hand back, feeling a chill that went beyond the cold of the base. "This is beyond bioengineering. It's as if these devices are alive." Luis glanced around nervously, his flashlight sweeping across the strange, half-alive devices embedded in the walls. "I don't like this," he muttered, clutching his equipment bag closer to his chest. "This place, it feels like a trap." As they moved further, they reached a raised platform at the center of the chamber, where a large, round control panel stood. Its surface was smooth and dark, punctuated by faintly glowing symbols. Mira approached it cautiously, unable to resist the pull of discovery, despite the warnings ringing in her mind. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the symbols, and a soft, melodic hum emerged from the panel. It was enticing, almost soothing, and for a moment the fear slipped away. Then, without warning, the symbols flared to life, and the hum deepened into a powerful, throbbing sound that resonated painfully in their skulls. The air around them grew dense, oppressive, pressing in as if the room itself had a pulse. Just as they staggered back, trying to shield themselves, the control panel emitted a blinding light, and the chamber seemed to bend and twist around them. Mira's vision blurred, and when it cleared, she gasped. The room seemed to shimmer and flicker, caught in a loop between past and present. Shadows of alien figures moved across the walls, repeating their actions in an eerie, jerky rhythm, as though trapped in time. The team watched in horror as the apparitions replayed scenes of work, interaction, and conflict, until one of the figures collapsed, convulsing as its body distorted and stretched unnaturally, flesh bubbling and elongating as if torn apart from within. "Oh God," Grant whispered, his voice a strangled mix of terror and disgust. "What happened to them?" Before anyone could answer, a loud crackling noise filled the room, and the shimmering figures vanished, leaving only the silent darkness around them. The team backed away from the platform, but Mira couldn't shake the image of the alien's distorted, writhing body. Her stomach twisted at the implication. Whatever technology the aliens had developed, it had the power to alter biology at a fundamental level. It was not just technology, it was a force capable of reshaping life itself. They pressed on, each step more hesitant, each shadow more sinister. Eventually, they entered a second chamber, smaller but even stranger than the first. Here, machines lined the walls, but unlike the pulsing cylinders, these devices were monolithic and foreboding, with dark, reflective surfaces that seemed to pull in the light around them. Symbols flashed erratically across their surfaces, scrolling and shifting in a language none of them recognized. At the center of the room stood a large, circular machine, its surface covered in an intricate network of shimmering fibers, like a spider web woven of liquid metal. Mira stepped closer, examining the fibers that seemed to ripple and shift under her gaze. "This looks like some kind of control device," she said, her voice tinged with apprehension. "But I can't tell what it's controlling." Louise hesitated, then reached out and cautiously touched one of the shimmering strands. The effect was instantaneous. A loud hum erupted from the machine, and the fibers flared with a blinding white light, wrapping around his hand like tendrils. He screamed, trying to pull away, but the fibers tightened, twisting around his wrist, then his forearm, moving up his arm in a sickeningly smooth motion, like liquid metal creeping over his skin. "Luis!" Caroline shouted, rushing forward. She grabbed his other arm, trying to pull him free, but the fibers pulsed with energy, knocking her back. Mira watched in horror as the fibers seemed to sink into Luis's skin, merging with him. His face contorted in agony, his skin taking on a strange metallic sheen as the fibers spread, twisting his flesh and bone, transforming his arm into something alien and unrecognizable. When the machine finally released him, he collapsed to the floor, clutching his twisted arm, panting in shock and horror. It's inside me," he gasped, staring at his arm in horror as the metallic veins throbbed beneath his skin, the fibers moving, shifting as if alive. The team watched in horrified silence, each of them feeling the encroaching dread sink deeper. They realized now that this place wasn't simply a relic of an ancient civilization. It was a repository of alien power, a treasury of technology designed for manipulation, transformation, and perhaps something far worse. Desperate to find answers, they continued through the labyrinthine corridors, stumbling upon room after room filled with strange devices. Some emitted cold blue lights, casting eerie shadows along the walls, while others hummed softly, emitting warmth and soft vibrations. One room contained large, circular devices set into the floor, with seats at the center and controls that suggested the ability to manipulate time and space. A sickening thrill shot through them as they realized these devices might grant powers beyond human imagination. But with that thrill came the undeniable horror of what these machines could do. Mira imagined a world where such technology was unleashed, where people could tamper with time, rearrange the very matter of their bodies, trigger catastrophes with a touch. The idea was seductive and terrifying in equal measure. As they ventured further, Mira couldn't shake a feeling that had been growing since the first chamber. A sense that the technology around them was not inert, not entirely asleep. It felt aware, like it was watching them, studying them as much as they studied it. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a low, malevolent hum, as though the entire structure resented their presence, or perhaps saw them as raw material to manipulate and reshape. Finally, they found a console with a language interface that Luis, despite his suffering, managed to decrypt partially. As the symbols translated, Mira read aloud, her voice trembling. It warns of consequences, manipulation, madness, transformation. This is not technology. It's a warning, a curse. A heavy silence fell over them. The words hung in the air, chilling them to their cores. They were standing in the heart of a civilization that had once wielded the power to shape life and nature, and had been destroyed by it. Whatever drove these aliens to abandon this place, it hadn't been a choice. It had been a desperate escape. "Let's get out of here," Grant whispered, his voice cracking. "We've seen enough." But even as they turned to leave, Mira hesitated, her gaze lingering on the strange, shimmering machines. The temptation was there, a dark allure that tugged at her. What if they could understand this technology, harness it, become something more? She shook her head, trying to dispel the thoughts, but the seed had been planted. As they hurried back through the corridors, Mira stole one last glance at the chamber, the strange devices flickering in the darkness like dying stars. The base seemed to pulse with rage, as if their trespass had awakened something vengeful, something that would not easily let them go. They didn't notice the dim lights lining the corridor flickering to life as they passed, nor the faint, rhythmic clicking echoing through the walls, the sound of something waking, something ancient and hostile, ready to reclaim its domain. Continuation of the story. Watch it tomorrow.